This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Lazav Dimir Mastermind EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Today we are updating and upgrading our Lazav Dimir Mastermind EDH deck. Before we start wheeling and dealing, let me let you know that down in the description of this video, you'll find a link to this build's deck tech. You'll also find a link to this build's deck list, which is updated to the moment. And you'll also find a link to the video primer series for this build. We only have a few cards going in, but that also means a few cards are coming out. So let's get started with... oh yeah, the Cyber Controller. Here we have a legendary Cyberman with a 3/3 body, and its mana value is X, 2 blue, and 1 black mana. When the Cyber Controller enters the battlefield, each opponent mills X cards. We put all creature cards milled this way onto the battlefield face down under our control. They're 2/2 Cyberman artifact creatures. Other artifact creatures we control get +1/+1. So those 2/2s become 3/3s. Now, let's keep in mind something here. Lazav, our commander, only cares about the creatures going into the graveyard. Once they hit the yard, Lazav doesn't care what happens to them thereafter. So with the Cyber Controller on our side of the battlefield, we can pick and choose which creatures Lazav becomes a copy of, and then we'll get that creature, in addition to hopefully a bunch more, onto our side of the battlefield as face-down 2/2s that the Cyber Controller will give +1/+1. So what we're looking at here, in this mill spell, we get a creature that's going to put more creatures onto our side of the battlefield as some decent 3/3s, in addition to having our commander become a copy of whatever the most threatening creature that gets milled this way. The Cyber Controller was absolutely built for this Lazav deck, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think the two of these guys are going to become BFFs for a very, very long time. I mean, it's in the actual acronym. That's the second F, people. That's forever. Cyber Controller, you are in the 99 of this build forever. That even means if for some unforeseen reason you get banned, you're still never coming out because Lazav just won't let it happen. It will not happen. All right, with the powerful Cyber Controller in a Dimir deck helmed by the Dimir Mastermind, the card it's going to replace is Extract from Darkness. Now here we had a sorcery for 3 in Dimir colors. This had each player put the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then we put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. Note that with this spell, that creature did not have to get milled by casting the spell. The Cyber Controller is a little bit different. It takes those creatures that were freshly milled by its enter the battlefield trigger and puts them onto our side of the battlefield face down as 2/2s. Here, with the investment of 5 mana, we pretty much are unearthing a creature from a graveyard, and it didn't have to be put there by casting Extract from Darkness. Once more, Lazav doesn't care what happens to the creature once it hits the graveyard, so having Extract from Darkness could be very, very useful, but we have to also understand this is a symmetrical effect. This isn't each opponent, this is each player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard. And although in a build like this, 1 or 2 cards are not going to make or break the game here, because we have so many cards that do redundant things in this build, if there's any way that we can make sure that we don't harm ourselves in any way, which is here, replacing Extract from Darkness with the Cyber Controller, then I think we need to do that, because let's face it, we don't want to put cards in our graveyard because that doesn't help out Lazav, that doesn't help out anything we're doing. We are not a self-mill build. We are let's mill our opponent's build. So let's replace the spells that potentially harm us by putting in spells that are only going to make this deck stronger while still staying in our theme of milling those opponents. That's why the Cyber Controller is so much better in a vacuum over Extract from Darkness, and even more so if the Dimir Mastermind himself is pushing that vacuum. All right, the next card going in, card number 2. It is Zelix, Sanity Flare. Oh, talk about a BFF circle here with our commander. We have a 2/3 legendary horror for 2 and 1 blue mana, and whenever a player mills 1 or more creature cards, we create a 1/1 black horror creature token. Let's just have that sink in for a moment. It does not say whenever 1 or more players mills. It says whenever a player mills 1 or more creature cards, we create a 1/1 black horror creature token. So if we're sitting at the EDH table with 3 opponents, and let's say we cast the Cyber Controller and mill each of those opponents, and they put at least 1 creature card into their graveyard, we are going to create 3 1/1 black horror creature tokens. We can also pay 1 generic mana and tap Zelix to have target player mill 3 cards. It won't be us. What a great way to really enhance what we're trying to do in this build, which is milling our opponent's libraries so that Lazav can pick and choose, and each time we do, we're going to we're going to create some black horrors, only to make our side of the battlefield even more threatening. The Cyber Controller does it. Zelix does it. Lazav is born for it. With Zelix going in, it is going to replace Curtain's Call. Here we had an instant for 5 and 1 black mana. Destroy 2 target creatures. It does have the Undaunted mechanic, which means this spell costs 1 less to cast for each opponent. This is all about when is it in our hand. Is it in our hand in the early game when we have 3 opponents? Because let's face it, 2 and a black mana to destroy 2 target creatures, well, that's pretty helpful because once those creatures hit the graveyard, zoom, Lazav is going to pick one of them if he wants, and he's going to become a copy of it. However, if we end up drawing this late game or we're down to 1 opponent, I'm going to be honest with you, paying 5 mana to tap to destroy 2 target creatures is not what we're looking to do with this build. We have other ways in which to deal with creatures on our opponent's sides of the battlefield, and Zelix Sanity Flare, although it's not removal, it's going to replace a removal spell that, let's face it, is deemed one of the weaker spells in this build. Zelix is a bomb. Curtain's Call is getting the curtains. All right, our last card going into this Lazav deck in this video today, card number 3, it is the Cruel Somnophage. We have a Star Nightmare for 1 and 1 black mana, but it has an adventure alongside it. It is a sorcery that's called Can't Wake Up. For 1 and 1 blue mana, target player mills 4 cards. That fits the theme of this build perfectly. It would be better if it were each opponent, but the other side of this card makes up for it. Cruel Somnophage's power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Remember, all of those creatures that are in our opponent's graveyards are there from our milling, from our destroying, from our discarding. They're going to be some quite hefty graveyards. With all of those creatures piling up, this boy is going to get big. The power and toughness is going to be absolutely huge, although it doesn't have evasion. Remember, we're Dimir. We're in the colors to make sure that the path to reaching our opponent's life totals is very easy, even with a great big huge creature with no evasion. With the Cruel one going in, it's going to replace Baleful Mastery. Now here we get an instant spell for 3 and a black mana or 1 and a black mana. We could choose to pay this spell for 1 and 1 black mana, and if we do, we put a card into an opponent's hand. That opponent gets to draw a card. We don't want to do that anymore. We are not sculpting these decks to give our opponents resources. We are sculpting this deck to take them away. And this spell exiles target creature or planeswalker. We don't want really to exile creatures from our opponents. We want to destroy them, let them hit the yard, or have them sacrifice or -X them, so that if needed, Lazav can become a copy of them and swing in for some lethal commander damage. Here, by exiling a creature, we're exiling any chance Lazav has to take that creature's shape. And there you have it, MTG BC. 3 more cards going into our Lazav Dimir Mastermind build. You let me know your thoughts about these additions in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, a channel for all things Magic.